The hearing room fell into stunned silence as Denzel Washington, dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit, stepped confidently up to the microphone. His powerful presence commanded immediate attention, turning every eye in the chamber toward him. Just moments earlier, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had been passionately addressing the committee. Her voice rang with defiance as she dismissed Washington's concerns about her ethics. "Mr. Washington has no business questioning my voting record or implying any misconduct," she declared firmly, her allies nodding in approval. "He's an actor, nothing more, pretending to be a politician." What Congresswoman Crockett didn't realize, however, was that Washington wasn't acting. In his hands, he held a folder filled with documents that could dismantle the pristine image she had so carefully cultivated. With laser-sharp focus and an expression of unwavering determination, Washington prepared to drop what might be the year's most explosive revelation. In the next 5 minutes, he would present evidence that could leave Jasmine Crockett speechless and possibly bring her political ascent to a screeching halt. Before we dive into the full story, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and be sure to subscribe for the latest on breaking political developments. This wasn't a publicity stunt. Denzel Washington hadn't come to Capitol Hill as a celebrity looking for attention. Although renowned for his Oscar-winning career and iconic film roles, Washington had, in recent years, taken on a new mission: community activism. Through his foundation, he had been working tirelessly to revitalize underserved neighborhoods, including several within Crockett's district. But as his team reviewed development contracts and analyzed voting records, they stumbled upon a troubling pattern. One that now stood at the heart of what was rapidly becoming a political firestorm stood Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a progressive powerhouse whose reputation now teetered on the edge of collapse. Crockett had made a name for herself as a fierce advocate for working families, a self-made success story who rose from modest beginnings to become a respected attorney and, eventually, a rising political star. Her speeches were fiery, her message uncompromising. "I don't represent donors, I represent people." That mantra had earned her trust among grassroots supporters and admiration from progressive circles nationwide. But Denzel Washington's quiet, methodical investigation painted a very different picture behind the scenes. For months, his team had been piecing together documents and cross-referencing records, uncovering a pattern that had eluded public scrutiny. What began as routine oversight of community development funding had now snowballed into something much more serious. By the time the congressional hearing opened that morning, the room was buzzing with anticipation. Journalists, political insiders, and citizens packed the gallery. Committee members on both sides of the aisle sensed that this would not be an ordinary session. The implications extended far beyond Congresswoman Crockett. This was shaping up to be a test of integrity in the political system itself. Throughout the morning, Washington had sat silently, enduring Crockett's dismissive remarks. "He's just another celebrity with an opinion," she had scoffed, prompting chuckles from her allies. But when Washington finally stood and stepped to the microphone, the atmosphere shifted. The room fell silent. Every eye was fixed on him. He placed his folder on the table with a calm, practiced motion and met Crockett's gaze directly. "Congresswoman," he began, his voice steady, resonant, unmistakable. "The American people have a right to know about your undisclosed meetings with Horizon Development." For a brief moment, Crockett's composed exterior faltered. She quickly recovered, offering a tight smile. "Mr. Washington," she replied, voice cool, "I meet with hundreds of groups and individuals. That's part of my job. There's nothing secretive about it." Washington nodded respectfully. "I understand," he said, opening the folder. "But I'm referring to 3 specific private meetings with Horizon CEO Richard Benson, held at the Westfield Hotel on January 15th, February 2nd, and February 28th of this year." He slid a document across to the committee chairman. "These are the hotel visitor logs confirming Benson's check-ins for private meeting rooms on those exact dates." The chairman studied the document, his expression tightening with interest. Crockett attempted another laugh, though this time, her tone had changed. "Meeting with business leaders isn't a crime, Mr. Washington. Maybe in Hollywood, standard political interaction looks sinister, but in the real world, you're absolutely right," Washington interrupted, his voice firm but composed. "Meeting with business leaders is standard. What's not standard are the remarkable coincidences that followed." He held up a second document. "This shows your voting record. On March 3rd, just 3 days after your last meeting with Benson, you abruptly reversed your stance and voted in favor of the East Side rezoning plan. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and committee members leaned forward. What had started as a routine hearing had now erupted into a public reckoning, one that could dismantle a rising political career and shake faith in those claiming to serve the people. Denzel Washington's voice remained steady, calm, but unmistakably resolute. The East Side District, he continued, is the same neighborhood where families in my foundation's programs have been fighting to stop commercial overreach. 1 week after your vote, Congresswoman, Horizon developers acquired 6 city blocks in that district for a luxury complex that will displace over 400 residents. A tense silence gripped the room. The committee chairman leaned forward, tone sharpened by the gravity of the revelation. Congresswoman Crockett, he said, would you like to respond? Crockett gathered her papers with deliberate poise, though a flicker of tension betrayed her usual composure. This is ridiculous, she said. I changed my vote because of community-protecting amendments added to the bill. What Mr. Washington is spinning as scandal is simply legislative work, twisted into conspiracy. Perhaps, Washington replied, his voice even. Except for this. He pulled out another document and slid it toward the chairman. This is a bank statement dated March 5, 2 days after the vote, showing a wire transfer of $250,000 from Offshore Account Holdings LLC to the Crockett Family Foundation. The hearing room exploded. Journalists scrambled to file updates. Flashbulbs flickered. Crockett's supporters glanced around, visibly shaken. That donation was publicly disclosed, Crockett snapped, raising her voice above the commotion. There is nothing illegal or improper about charitable giving. Washington waited for the noise to die down. I agree, he said softly. Charitable donations can be a force for good. But here's what we found. He produced yet another document and slid it forward. This is the corporate registration for Offshore Account Holdings LLC. It lists the founder as Rebecca Benson, the wife of Richard Benson, CEO of Horizon Developers. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The flashes from cameras intensified. Crockett's face drained of color. The committee chairman spoke again, his voice somber now. Congresswoman, did you disclose this connection between the donor and Horizon Developers when you reversed your position on the East Side rezoning? Crockett opened her mouth, then hesitated. I wasn't aware of any connection. The donation came through the appropriate reporting channels, she said, her voice faltering for the first time. Washington leaned in slightly, his tone now tinged with a quiet gravity. Perhaps you weren't, he said. But I have one more piece of evidence. The room froze. Even her most loyal allies were no longer defending her, only watching with unease. Washington held up an email printout. This email, he began, is from your chief of staff, Marcus Jenkins, to Richard Benson. It's dated January 12th, 3 days before your first known meeting. It reads, and I quote, "The Congresswoman appreciates your discretion. The Westfield Hotel offers the privacy we need for these discussions. She looks forward to a mutually beneficial arrangement regarding the East Side situation." The chamber erupted into chaos. Committee members began shouting. Photographers surged forward. Crockett stared blankly at Washington as her polished political persona began to unravel under the weight of the moment. The chairman pounded his gavel. Order. We will have order in this hearing. As the noise began to settle, Washington remained standing calm, composed, the evidence neatly arrayed in front of him. Crockett leaned toward her attorney, whispering urgently, her hands trembling. But Washington wasn't finished. Mr. Chairman, he said, I'd also like to draw the committee's attention to 5 other development projects by Horizon that have been approved in areas where Congresswoman Crockett previously opposed construction. In each case, substantial donations followed, funneled to her foundation through separate shell companies that we have traced back to the Bensons. There was nothing more to say. The scandal had broken wide open, before the nation, and under oath. This is nothing more than character assassination, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett finally said, her voice trembling, whether from anger, fear, or both was unclear. Mr. Washington has no credentials in political or campaign finance law. He's cherry-picking unrelated events to weave a false narrative. Washington remained composed. Without missing a beat, he reached into his folder and withdrew one final document. Actually, he replied, I anticipated that concern. This report comes from Robert Michaels, former chairman of the Federal Election Commission. His analysis identifies 7 potential violations of ethics rules and campaign finance laws in these transactions. The report is available for full committee review. Murmurs spread through the room. Several committee members glanced uneasily at each other, while some of Crockett's allies subtly slid their chairs farther down the table, putting physical distance between themselves and the embattled Congresswoman. The chairman called for a 15-minute recess to allow time for initial document review. When the session resumed, all eyes turned to the front of the chamber. The chairman addressed Washington directly. Mr. Washington, these are serious allegations, substantiated by credible documentation and expert testimony. I want to thank you for presenting this through the appropriate legal channels. Washington gave a respectful nod. Mr. Chairman, he said solemnly, I take no satisfaction in any of this. My foundation works hand in hand with families in these very neighborhoods. They place their trust in their representative to safeguard their communities, not to sell them out. When these disturbing connections came to light, we had no choice but to act. The chairman then turned to Crockett. Congresswoman, you are entitled to respond to these allegations in full. The once confident Congresswoman now appeared visibly diminished. During the recess, she had conferred intensely with her legal counsel. Her tone, once fiery and unyielding, had shifted to cautious restraint. She rose slowly, eyes scanning the room filled with cameras, committee members, and reporters. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, she began, her voice quieter than before. I want to be clear. I have always acted in what I believe to be the best interests of my constituents. If there were any inappropriate links between donations and legislative decisions, I was not personally aware of them. A ripple of gasps swept across the gallery. Washington stood silent for a moment, then gently echoed her words, not personally aware. He didn't raise his voice, but the weight behind his words filled the chamber. Congresswoman Crockett, he continued, lifting one final document from the table, this is your personal calendar, legally obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. It details private meetings with Richard Benson. Each is marked as strategy discussion, EB project. He held her gaze. EB, clearly referring to the East Side Building's development. Washington's voice didn't hold triumph. It held something heavier, disappointment. And for the first time that day, Jasmine Crockett had no words. You've told your constituents time and again, Denzel Washington began, his voice calm but resolute, and I quote directly from your campaign literature, I will never put donors above community needs. He let the words hang in the air for a beat. And yet these documents show a consistent pattern of prioritizing a developer's interests immediately following sizable financial contributions. The committee chairman nodded silently to a staffer, who began handing out copies of the evidence Washington had presented. As lawmakers flipped through the reports, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Grim expressions replaced neutral ones. Tension grew thicker by the second. Then, unexpectedly, a senior committee member, one from Congresswoman Crockett's own party, cleared his throat and spoke. Mr. Chairman, he said, carefully, in light of the seriousness of these allegations and the strength of the documentation provided, I move that this matter be formally referred to the House Ethics Committee for immediate investigation. I second the motion, added a representative from the opposing party, marking a rare moment of bipartisan agreement. Crockett sat frozen, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. Her carefully constructed political identity, champion of the people, fighter for the working class, was unraveling in real time. The chairman turned back to Washington. Mr. Washington, your testimony today reflects a level of civic responsibility we rarely witness in this chamber. It's refreshing to see someone of your stature use their platform to uncover potential corruption rather than seek personal gain. Washington nodded, his face solemn. Mr. Chairman, I believe deeply in the promise of public service, he said. The families in these neighborhoods placed their trust in a representative who told them she'd put people before donors. They deserved someone who would live up to that promise, not just say the words. Then he turned, looking directly at Congresswoman Crockett. His tone remained composed, but his words struck like a hammer. You once said that words without action are just empty promises. Today, your actions have spoken louder than any speech. For the first time in her career, Jasmine Crockett, known for her fiery comebacks and unapologetic rhetoric, had no response. The vote to refer the matter to the Ethics Committee was unanimous. As the room fell into heavy silence, Denzel Washington calmly collected his documents. He hadn't come for applause, or cameras, or political vengeance. He came for one reason: accountability. Cameras captured the moment he walked out, his image destined to headline news across every network by nightfall. Denzel Washington exposes Crockett quickly became the top trending hashtag on social media. Viral clips of the hearing spread like wildfire, juxtaposing Washington's calm, fact-based presentation with Crockett's increasingly strained denials. Political analysts scrambled to respond. Even her most loyal defenders were at a loss. One prominent commentator put it bluntly, the damage isn't just in the evidence. It's in the contradiction between who she claimed to be and what she actually did. By evening, 3 major networks aired special segments examining the implications of the bombshell hearing. Washington didn't just reveal possible corruption, one anchor noted. He exposed the gap between political rhetoric and political reality, the exact frustration voters feel every election cycle. Outside Crockett's district office, chaos had taken hold. Staffers were seen leaving with personal belongings. Reporters were met with silence. Allies who once stood proudly beside her now issued carefully crafted statements. "I've always supported Congresswoman Crockett's stated principles," one colleague said, pointedly emphasizing stated. "If these allegations hold up, they represent a serious betrayal of everything we claim to stand for." Meanwhile, Washington quietly made his way to one of the East Side community centers his foundation supports. He spent the evening listening to residents, many of whom were directly impacted by the controversial rezoning project. "He didn't have to do this," said 67-year-old Elenina Jackson, a longtime resident facing displacement. "He could have just stayed in Hollywood, written a check, and walked away. But instead, he stood up for people like me, people who don't have a voice." The next morning, the Washington Post published a damning investigative follow-up. Their reporting confirmed Washington's evidence and went further, revealing that Horizon developers had even drafted large portions of the rezoning legislation that Crockett later introduced as her own. By midday, the House Ethics Committee had announced an expedited inquiry. The Department of Justice confirmed it was reviewing the evidence for potential violations of federal anti-corruption statutes. In less than 24 hours, a congressional hearing had evolved into a full-blown political earthquake, and at its center stood a Hollywood icon, no longer just a performer, but a symbol of truth, accountability, and the voice of the people. When Jasmine Crockett finally stepped forward to make a public statement, the contrast from her usual presence was striking. Gone were the fiery speeches, the confident stride, the crowd of loyal staffers and supporters at her side. In their place stood a subdued figure, flanked by a noticeably smaller entourage, clutching a prepared statement that bore all the hallmarks of a crisis communications team. "I take these allegations very seriously," she read, eyes downcast. "I welcome the opportunity to address them through the proper legal and ethical channels. I remain committed to serving my constituents while this matter is resolved." But the attempt at damage control came far too late. The timing could not have been worse. With primary filing deadlines rapidly approaching and challengers already preparing campaigns, political analysts openly questioned whether Crockett's career could withstand the blow. "This isn't the kind of scandal you recover from with a press release or a half-hearted apology," said one veteran strategist. "It undermines the very foundation of her political brand, the promise that she stood for the people against entrenched interests. That promise now rings hollow." Meanwhile, Denzel Washington's role in the unfolding drama drew praise from unexpected quarters, including critics typically skeptical of celebrity involvement in politics. A leading national editorial declared, "What Denzel Washington demonstrated wasn't star power, it was civic power. He didn't come for headlines. He came prepared, with evidence and principle, and delivered it with restraint, not theatrics. This is what responsible engagement looks like." Community groups from the impacted neighborhoods wasted no time. Several organizations announced plans to legally challenge the development projects at the heart of the scandal, using Washington's evidence as the foundation for their case. Legal experts were optimistic. "This dramatically strengthens their position," said a constitutional law professor. What Washington did wasn't just expose a single politician's conduct. He revealed a systemic failure, where private influence disguises itself as public service. The consequences could ripple far beyond one district. Among Crockett's former supporters, the sense of betrayal was deep and personal. "I believed in her," said a volunteer who had worked on her last campaign. "I thought she was different. It wasn't just about policies, it was about trust. And now it feels like we were just props in a political performance." As the dust settled and legal proceedings loomed, the fallout from the scandal extended well beyond Congress. What began as a routine oversight hearing had evolved into a national reckoning about integrity, accountability, and the fragile line between public service and private gain. But perhaps the most far-reaching consequence of the hearing was what followed in its wake. Inspired by Denzel Washington's actions, community advocacy groups across the country began announcing their own initiatives, launching investigations into suspicious development deals in their districts. What began as a single act of civic courage had become a spark igniting a national movement. Denzel Washington didn't just uncover one unethical relationship, said the director of a leading government ethics watchdog. He may have laid the foundation for a new model of citizen-led oversight, one that empowers everyday people to hold power accountable. The evening after the hearing, Washington was quietly filmed having dinner with residents of the East Side District. There were no press conferences, no social media posts, just a man listening. No entourage, no handlers. Just someone who had shown up, done the work, and stayed to hear the stories of those who mattered most. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett faced the fallout. Her campaign donations dried up overnight. Key political allies stopped taking her calls. And the slow but certain wheels of the justice system had begun to turn. Perhaps the most painful blow of all was the loss of her constituents' trust. The very people she had once pledged to fight for now viewed her with disappointment, even disdain. This wasn't merely the downfall of one politician. It was a vivid reminder of how truth can pierce through even the most carefully curated political facade. It underscored a deeper truth. Fame isn't required to demand integrity from our elected leaders. Courage is. And then came the image that would be replayed across news outlets and social media platforms for days, a photograph that captured the entire saga in a single frame. Washington, seated among East Side residents, listening as they spoke, many of their faces reflecting something long forgotten in politics: hope. In the background, workers were dismantling a weathered campaign billboard. The slogan once emblazoned across it, now bitterly ironic: people over profit. Thanks for tuning into this powerful political story. If this moved you, hit the like button and subscribe for more breaking stories from the front lines of democracy. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss a critical update. Is Jasmine Crockett just the beginning? Could this signal a wave of accountability in American politics? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. Should more public officials be held to the same standard?